Are you stressed out during the holidays because of all of the stuff that's going on around you? Well, you're not alone. And today, I really want to talk about some tips to help you cope with holiday stress. So I know everyone says, ooh, festive, merry, right? This is supposed to be this kind of glorious time of year where everything is perfect. And I think that often adds to the stress that we all feel around this kind of time of year going into any major holidays that you may celebrate or out of, depending. And I just want to give some tips on how to cope with that because it can certainly impact our work. And I don't know if you struggle with this as well, but a lot of folks that I work with talk about how once Thanksgiving in the US, it's in November, once that has rolled around, it can be really hard to sort of focus back on work at the end of it. It just feels like it's kind of a long, slow slide into New Year's. So if you're really struggling with that, here's some basic tips on just coping with your holiday stress so that you can continue to be a productive worker or a person applying for jobs, and so that you can hopefully have a little bit of fun this holiday season. So the first thing I always advise people to do is really acknowledge how you're feeling. Holiday time can be very stressful and can bring up a lot of old stuff. Or, if you've lost loved ones, it can also be a time when you just really feel sad about them, really missing them. I lost a very dear friend this past year, and so this will be my first Christmas without him. So I'm definitely feeling some of that sorrow around it. And you just really want to take some time to really acknowledge that because your feelings are fine. They're legitimate to have, and it's really okay to be super sad if there is someone who should be with you who can no longer be. Also, you may have some complicated stuff around, perfectionism and, everything being wonderful and all of that based on your family history or sort of cultural expectations around it. So really think hard about that perfectionism. That's my second tip. It doesn't really do us any good. And, I think about this time of year in much the same way I think of big meals. So something like, let's say, Thanksgiving. If you're planning to make all of the food yourself, even if you only have a small family, that's a lot of work for one person. You're doing a whole lot of things. And I think this is a really good time to remember that we can only do as much as we can do and be sane. And so you don't aim for perfection. What I often do for a big meal like Thanksgiving is rely on some store-bought help. So I'm big on homemade desserts. That's not a place where I will compromise. I'm always going to make dessert, but I might get a cheese platter for the appetizer. So think about that as kind of your sense of perfection. You don't compromise on the stuff that feels really integral to who you are, but you do think about places where it feels okay to compromise. And that's where you sort of set your bar. Remember that very good is still very good, and there's no real such thing as perfection. Then the other thing that can be really hard for us this time of year is saying no as we need to, particularly if you're in a job that is demanding. You'll find that people are kind of asking known good workers to pick up a little bit of extra slack, and that's because everybody else's attention has kind of slipped a little bit. So be really aware of kind of how your level of work or your stress level is building. And as you need to, say no. That is also, of course, true in your personal life. If people are asking you to do things for them in particular, as opposed to with them, then you might just have to gauge your level of commitment and stress and really be mindful of what you say yes and no to. And what I do when I'm trying to figure out what to say no to is I really think about how much of a time suck each of those is going to be. If it's something small and satisfying and it's something that I can do with some of my loved ones, then I'll usually say yes. But if it's going to take me a really long time or make me feel super stressed out, then of course that is when I will usually say no. And then finally, I really encourage you at any stressful time, even if it's good stress, to stay very focused on your self-care. What self-care looks like is going to depend a lot on where you are and just kind of what your overall mental health is in any given moment. Some days, especially if you're kind of in the grips of depression, self-care is maybe getting out of bed and going and standing in the sun for a couple of minutes. If you're pretty functional though, your self-care routine is going to be all of that stuff that you normally do when you're feeling your best. Eating right, getting those fruits and vegetables and whole grains, getting some exercise, going to bed and waking up at normal times, drinking some water, not just coffee, I know that temptation. Really just kind of doing all of those things, if you have a mindfulness practice, making sure you keep focused on that, etc. But really acknowledge where you are, because there are definitely times when all of those things just feel like an additional burden. And so you're certainly allowed to start small with any of those things. So really think about the ones that are likely to be kind of the least effort on your part and still yield good results for you. So take charge of your self-care, but write down what you think that's going to mean for you. And then if you really need some help with especially work stuff, be sure you're talking to your boss about it, because this is such a difficult time of year. And you may just find that you're not capable right now of doing the same amount of work that you're capable of doing, say, in April. So really just kind of be thinking about that, what it looks like for you. If you're applying for jobs, the good news right now is that you can give yourself a little bit of a break, because this isn't a time when employers tend to be super good at thinking about their hiring. They may be planning to hire in the new year, so you may see a little bit of an uptick in applications, but you have a little bit of leeway around kind of how quickly things are going to happen. So, don't stress yourself out too much, but get some applications in if you see jobs that look really good. And then you probably get to coast through the holidays until at least New Year's. So, that sort of first or second week in January is when you're likely to start getting things like interviews and so forth. That, of course, depends on the industry and how quickly, or I guess how demanding the job is. Very high need jobs are going to hire obviously a little bit faster, but most of us get a little bit of a break if we're going through the process of interviewing right now. So let me know if you have questions. Let me know if you have some good holiday coping tips, and I'll see you here next week.